Hey everyone, it's John again with Sample 5, and today we're going to go through getting started with Amazon Connect. Now, if you saw the last video, and I'll try to throw a link up here somewhere, we went through and very quickly set up Amazon Connect. I didn't explain anything what I was doing. We just saw how quickly we could do it, and it was very, very fast. As promised, we're going to do this video. We're going to go through the same process, and then add a few more things on the end. To how you would go about getting started. We'll talk about why we're making the decisions we're making, what some of the options are if something makes different sense for your organization. But let's go ahead and get started. The first thing we're going to notice is we're within the AWS Management Console. You do need to have an AWS account to start this process. I'm not going to go through that here. I'm going to assume that you already have that. But we're going to go and search for Amazon Connect. So just search for Connect. And when you select that, you should end up with a page that looks very similar to this. We're going to go ahead and click Get Started. And on our first page of the setup, this is our identity management page. With Connect, you have a few different options for how you handle identity management. Connect itself can be the identity provider, where you set up users and passwords within the Amazon Connect service, and that's what authenticates your agents and supervisors as they log in. Additionally, you can point to a directory like Active Directory or Amazon Directory. And then you can also use SAML 2.0 based authentication. So if you wanted to connect to something like Azure Directory or Okta, something like that, you could choose those. Now, these two, the last two options here do require a little bit more configuration just to get those services ready to talk with Connect and get everything going. We're not going to cover that in today's video. We're just going to stick with storing users within Amazon Connect. And you do need to provide it with an access URL. So this is what your users will point their browser to when they need to log in. So I'm just going to say John Welsh, like we did in our last video, and we'll go ahead and go to the next step. This is where you will create an administrator for your system. If you skip this right now, you do have access via your AWS console administrator. There will be a link for emergency access. I'm going to go ahead and create this user right now. It's John Welsh, and I'm just going to give it a throwaway password and give it an email. Now, the thing to note that this email address, if it doesn't exist, it's okay. This is the email that's going to be used for things like if you need to reset your password or anything like that. And I apparently typed my password incorrectly, so I do need to update that. Now we're good to go. So once you created your administrator, go ahead and go to the next step. You can opt to have Connect only do incoming calls or outbound calls. Now, this is a setting that can be changed once the system is set up. But the one thing to note is when we did identity management, that is a setting that you cannot change. So if you set it up with Connect as your identity provider, you will have to set up a new instance if you wanted to change that to SSO. So really plan it out ahead of time to make sure that you're good to go before you go through this process, to just make sure it's doing what you want. But this you can change later. We're going to leave it to make inbound and outbound calls and go to the next step. The data storage, this is where we can define where we want to store call recordings, call transcripts, exported reports, and contact flow logs. So if it's going to automatically create an S3 bucket to store these. If you have an S3 bucket that you want to use that's already set up, you can point it to that. Additionally, on each of these, there's an option for encrypting the records that get stored there. So if we uncheck this, we would not be encrypting, but it's by default going to encrypt using the Amazon Connect KMS master key that it has. If you wanted to use your own master key that's stored in KMS, you can select from the list there, or enter the ARN for that key, and so that way you can really set up the encryption the way you want it to. Now, the recordings, the chat transcripts, exported reports, those are all going to be stored within S3. So really defining what you want your encryption policy to be is going to be important for dealing with security department, making sure that they're comfortable with how this is set up. For right now, though, I'm going to cancel out of this because I don't want to change my encryption setup currently, and we'll go to the next step. The next step is just going to review the settings that we already had. So I'm going to go ahead and create instance because I feel comfortable with all the things that I've put in there already. And again, this is the part of the process that probably takes the most bit of time, because what it's doing is it's going around in the back end. It's setting up all of the resources on the AWS cloud to make sure that that you can run your service and have it run reliably. So it's setting up any sort of EC2 instances that support the service. It's doing it in multiple availability zones so that you have that high availability capability. It's making sure that any of the session border controllers that connect to the telecom are able to talk to the EC2. All of that stuff is happening. So we'll give it just a little bit longer and it should be about ready. All right. So there we go. We are ready to go. We can either click Get Started, and what that's going to do is it's going to take us to the interface logged in as our AWS console admin. If we click the link down here, it'll take us to a login page and we can log in using the account that we just created. I'm going to do that now. And here's our login. I'm going to zoom in on that a little bit. There we go. There's our login. And we are logged into the system. And when you first log in, it does give you this dashboard with kind of the set of steps that it recommends that you go through to get your system set up. If you've done this a few times, you really don't have to refer to those steps as much. You just kind of walk through it. But the first thing that typically you're going to do is you're going to go and claim a phone number. Now, this does not have to be the phone number that you're going to use in a production instance. This could be something that you're just going to use for testing. But in order to place calls into the system, we do need to have a phone number. And it's very easy to pick one. So we're just going to hit claim phone number. We'll choose DID for right now, just because I don't want to pay the extra rate for those toll-free calls if I go over the free tier. And there is a free tier associated with this service. I'm going to select 214 just because that's up the road. Oh no, there's no more 214. So we'll just select something from the list. So now it's important to note, if you search in here and you search for an area code that you're hoping to get a number in and they don't have one, that doesn't mean you can't get one. You can issue a support request to request more numbers, and chances are they'll be able to get a number in that area code unless it's just something that's really difficult to get a hold of. But for right now, because I'm not going to open a support case just for this video, I'm going to select one of these 606 numbers. You can define a contact flow to point to, because the system does come with a bunch of prepackaged contact flows so that you can get started without having to do a whole lot of load. You can take a look at what's there and use that to base your own contact flows off of. And I'm just going to select this first contact experience flow right now. So we'll save that. And now we have our phone number, and it's pointed to that contact flow. So as you recall, when we did the speed test video, you do have to wait a little bit of time for this number to be active and for the contact flow to be active so that you can place a call into it. We're not going to do that right now. We're going to go ahead and move forward. And the next thing we'll do is we're going to define some hours of operation. So hours of operation can be associated with a queue or with a contact flow to define open and close hours for those items. Within a contact flow, you can create branches for open and close and have the flow do different things based upon what time it is. And for the queue, if you route a call to the queue during those off hours, you can have it take a branch to say, hey, sorry, we're closed, and do something else as a result. It does come by default with a basic hours, which is really just always open. So I'm going to go ahead and add a new hours, and we'll just call this Monday through Friday, 8 to 5. I always like to name mine something like this, where you've got the day and the time, rather than saying like it's Joe's open hours or anything like that, because at a glance you can very easily determine, oh, this is the time I want. And so if you've got multiple groups that have the same open hours, it's really just a matter of picking that same one that's already been developed. Give it a description. And then down below, you will be tempted to hit the checkbox to do something here. But what we're going to do is we're going to change these to 8. If I can type correctly. And they're already 5, so that's good. And then what we're going to do is check the checkboxes for the ones that we don't want anymore, and we will remove those. And then we can select the time zone. So I'm going to pick Central, U.S. Central, and save that. And so now we have our hours of operation, and we can use that as we build things out in the call center in the future. The next thing we're going to do is we'll build out some queues. And queues are just what you think they are. They're a destination that you'll have agents answer calls and where calls can wait for agents if they need to. So I'm just going to call this guy first queue. But really, this would be whatever it's going to be used for, IT help desk or finance or whoever you need to do. You can set your hours of operations here. So I'll set Monday through Friday, 8 to 5. You can have if we have an outbound, you can define what your outbound caller ID name is, sample 5 demo. And you can define your outbound caller ID number. Now, in this drop down, you'll only be able to select any phone numbers that are associated with the system itself. So if you had an external phone number that maybe is your main number for your organization, you can't select it from here. There is a way to do that. You do have to open up a ticket to get access to do a custom caller ID for those outbound calls and prove that you own the number. It's just a way to prevent some of the fraudulent phone number spoofing. But you do have the ability to do that. It's just we're not going to cover that in this video. And then if you wanted to do an outbound whisper flow, so this would be something that happened when the caller picked up the phone before they connected to an agent or anything. We can set a limit for the queue. So if we only wanted to have 5 calls in queue at one time, you could do that. You can only set this to the maximum number of concurrent calls for your system. So right now I have a total of 10 concurrent calls allowed on my system. I can update that if I need to, but as a result, I can only put in nine calls in queue. But I'm not going to worry about that today. We'll undo the limit. And you can also add quick connects. So quick connects are speed dials for the system. So if you have external numbers that your agents maybe transfer calls to a lot, or they need to transfer calls to another queue or to specific agents, you can create quick connects for all 3 of those things, and you can add them by queue. So as an agent takes a call in that queue, it'll show up in their interface that they can use that quick connect and go from there. I don't have any quick connects defined right now, so I'm just going to go ahead and add new queue. All right, so we've got basic queue and we've got first queue. I'll briefly go to quick connects. I'm not going to create one, but I'll go through the process just so you can see. So under the routing arrows, we had quick connects. If we add new, we just give it a name, we give it a type. So external would be that phone number, queue, or agent. If we do queue, it'll give us an option to select from the queues that are there, as well as the contact flow that we want to use when placing that call, and a description. So this is something to play around with. We're not going to create those today, but just know that they are there. So now we've got our hours of operations and our queues created. So the next thing I'm going to do is create some routing profiles. And routing profiles are basically the way that you skill an agent to be able to answer calls for a particular queue. I'm going to add a new profile to start with, and we're just going to call this first queue agents. RP for agents that answer first queue. And you can define whether you want the system to be able to place voice calls, chat calls, or both to this queue. If you don't have chat set up in your system, it doesn't hurt to check it, but you can also leave it blank, and that's fine. So I'll leave it as it is right now. For the queue, we're going to go ahead and select first queue, and we're going to select voice as the channel. So if you have multiple queues assigned here, you can have some that are voice, some that are chat, some that are both, as long as you have both of those selected up here. We're going to leave the priority where it is, and we're going to leave the delay where it is. And if you were just wanting them to answer just calls for that first queue, then that would be it. We could define an outbound queue. We're going to define first queue that defines what's used for that caller ID and the outbound flow, and we could save it at this point. But I'm going to go ahead and add one more queue here just to show you some of the ways that this works. So we're going to select basic queue. We'll do the voice again. All right, let's talk about this priority because this is kind of an important topic when you're building out the routing profiles. If both of these were set to priority 1, and you had calls that were waiting in both of those queues, then a person that's assigned to this routing profile would take calls from either of those based upon who was waiting the longest. If instead the second queue was set to priority 2 and there were calls waiting in both queues, the person that's in this routing profile would only take calls from first queue until there were no calls waiting, and then they could take calls from the second queue. So if you have groups of users that answer more than one queue, but their focus is this one type of call, you can definitely do that by using priority. Additionally, there is the concept of delay. So if both of these were set to priority 1, and let's say that we had a 5-second delay on basic queue, and there was a call that came in and was waiting in queue, it would wait 5 seconds before it extended the call to an agent in this route profile. And the reason is because maybe there are other agents in different routing profiles where basic queue is their primary task. And so we want to make sure that they answer the call first. And so it'll wait until the call's in queue for 5 seconds before it delivers here. You can combine priority and delay so that you're really sure that they're really focusing on that first queue. It's really a matter of how you define what's needed for your organization. So we'll add that new route profile. And then the last thing we're probably going to do today is actually there's 2 more things. I'm going to go to user management and we'll add a user. And so we'll add a new user. And you can create a new user manually, or you can upload a CSV template. It does provide you a link to that template there, so you can download it and fill it out and create multiples at once. For purposes here, we're just going to create one, and we will do. We'll make Bruce Wayne, and we'll give him a login name of B Wayne, And again, this email address is going to be used for those password recovery. If you don't enter a correct email address here, it will still allow you. A lot of people that are setting up demo systems where they want to have multiple agents will just use the same email for all of those agents. So you can log into them, and if you forget the password, it all goes to that same email address. In a production environment, you would want this to be the email of the agent, just so that you're not getting emails when they forget their password or anything like that. We'll give it a password. And at this point, we select a routing profile. So the thing we just set up, we'll select our first queue agents, and you can select a security profile. These are the 4 that are out of the box when you first get your Amazon Connect instance going. You can create additional security profiles. You can also edit these. So if you have particular requirements that, hey, I want my supervisors to have these rights, you can add rights. It's pretty granular on what you can allow or disallow. I'm just going to create this guy as an agent. Here we can define whether we want them to use a soft phone or a desk phone. So if we wanted it sent to a 10-digit phone number, we could define the desk phone and send it there. I'm going to leave that as soft phone for right now. And we will... Oh, I'm apparently missing something. Hold on one second. Let's see what I've missed. Oh, we need to have a more secure password. So, and at that point, we should be able to save down below. Now, when you hit save, you might get to this page and think, I'm done. But the thing to note is you do still need to create users. And this is kind of the reason this is here is because if you're doing that bulk import with the CSV, it'll show you all the users that you're creating to make sure that they're all there, and then you can create. It still shows the same page if you're creating one. So make sure you click that create users again, and it'll take you to a very similar page where you don't have to click create more users. And there we go. There is Bruce Wayne, our next call center agent. The last thing we're going to talk about today is agent status. When you out of the box set up Amazon Connect, it's going to come with two statuses. So this is our contact control panel. I'm going to go ahead and allow that for now. We have offline and we have available, and that's it. So most organizations want to do something like offer breaks, meetings, anything like that, and that's where our agent status comes into effect. So I'll go ahead and add a new one. We'll call this break on a break, and enable for use in CCP. If you didn't want it to show up in the contact control panel right now because you were testing some things out and wanted to get everything built first, you could uncheck that. But for our purposes today, we're going to save that. So if we go back to our contact control panel here, and we look, once we allow that, we can click on there, and there is our break status. Now, keep in mind, it may take a few seconds for this to appear in your contact control panel, but very easy to create those statuses, and then we can report on them later. So from a getting started with Connect standpoint, that's really what I wanted to show today. Here in a couple of weeks, I'll come back out with getting started with contact flows, where we'll do some beginner contact flows and get you familiar with that contact flow interface and how to build out those flows to meet your call requirements. Until then, thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.